I'm your host, Paola Mardo. Tune in to Long Distance at longdistanceradio.com. Hey, Patrick.
What's up?
What you doing?
Working on an episode of Long Distance TV, the video documentary companion series to Long Distance Podcast.
Cool. So, what does it actually take to make long distance TV?
Well, after we figure out the story, I have to shoot, log footage, and edit, and edit.
Right.
Edit,
And there's sound design, mixing, color correction, uploading. That's a lot of work.
Yeah. What about you? What does it take to make the podcast?
I gotta do research, pre-interviews, book interviews, record interviews, transcribe and log tape, write, sound design, and edit, and edit, and edit.
Sounds familiar.
Yep, but we love working on this, right? And thankfully this season, we have support from the Google Podcast Creator Program and from some of our long-distance listeners.
Cool. So if listeners want to support the show, how do they do it?
The best way to support Long Distance is to join the Long Distance Radio Club Patreon. It's a membership platform where you can support us while we make the show, with special perks and updates.
I can confirm there are special perks and updates.
But there are other ways to help too. You can share the show on social media and in real life, or rate and review it on Apple Podcasts.
Head to longdistanceradio.com/support to find other ways to help.
Now, back to the show.
All right. Edit, and edit, and edit, and edit, and edit.
You're listening to Long Distance. I'm Paola Mardo. On this episode, something a little different. We begin a story told in two parts about a woman named Myrla Baldonado. Okay, can you tell me what we're looking at in the first photo and tell me what's happening here?
So this is a picture which was taken in front of the male brigade of the detention center for common crime violators. Probably this picture was in between 83 and 85. I was quite settled in jail already.
We're looking at a photo of Myrla smiling in a courtyard with a group of men, mostly gang members, she says. They're in Camp Makinaya, a detention center for men and women near what was then a U.S. naval base in Subic Bay in the Philippines. At the time, it was a jail for common criminals. But at the height of the dictatorship of then-President Ferdinand Marcos, this camp was also a place where political prisoners were kept, like Myrla, a full-time activist fighting against the Marcos regime. So you're in the front, you're the only woman, and you're smiling. Can you tell me why you're smiling?
Yeah, I'm thinking, why am I smiling? I think the first months are the difficult months. And then later on, somehow you have to survive and you try to settle down as if this is home. Otherwise, you get depressed, you get stressed out. So in this photo, they do some sort of like a weekly entertainment for those who are there. And I remember being an MC and, just trying to survive.
Myrla, Part 1, The Underground.
I went to college in Manila from 1969 to 1971. I studied at the Philippine College of Commerce. It is a public college that's being funded by the Philippine government. It was in the area of the hotbed of activism, very close to the Malacanang Palace, where the President of the Philippines resides. College was a time of turmoil in the Philippines. There was what they call the first quarter storm. It was like an awakening on the part of the students, understanding the basic problems of the Philippine society, why there is poverty, why the economy is so bad. It's also a period of fighting and battling the government. Our school is very close to Menjola, and they had the Battle of Menjola there. Students battling the state. Students getting killed, They call it the days of disquiet and the nights of rage.
Siguro, ang akala ni Marcos at ng kanyang mga tuta ng galamay ng imperialismo Amerikano.
We see in the GI struggle in all parts of the world an identity in protesting and struggling against American imperialism.
That's why the necessary form of a struggle in the Philippines is no other than a national democratic revolution.
Were you there?
No, I wasn't part of that yet.
Why not?
Because I was afraid. My parents always told me, don't join that, don't do that. I just came out of high school. However, at school, I was in the battlefield. And every day there would be room-to-room discussions, people going around to explain issues. Marcos was juggling funds from education to the military. He was preparing to declare martial law. So you get a lot of people becoming more radicalized in that situation. In fact, our professors had us go to the Malacanang Palace, to the park in front of it, so there would be a lot of discussion groups and explanation, and also clearly fighting the Marcos administration to stop that practice of putting more money into the military, and also not having enough books, not having better classrooms, going into issues of sending troops to Vietnam, and then also the relationship between the United States government and the Philippines. I was in that situation and I am hearing it every day. And then I started thinking, yeah, it does make sense. To me, the Vietnam War was also an opening. It really opened my mind to the larger issues of our government still being dictated by the US in terms of policy. The treaties that are still existing that practically makes us into a new type of colony. So I started turning to the books and reading and listening more to those who came to the classrooms, whom I earlier was debating, debating for the reasons that I couldn't believe that, we could change this society. And so I started becoming one of them. I think that was a time when I was ready to be part of a nationalist group that would fight against the roots of poverty and neocolonialism and stuff like that. So I asked one of my classmates, who was the coolest of them all, what group she belongs to. This classmate never, would shout at me or interject me or debate me, but she would just explain things. She belonged to a cultural group, Kamanyang Players. It was actually the official cultural group of the college. So we did theater, a lot of street plays to explain the basic problems of the Philippine society and how we could change that. Yes, I was a performer. I had the contributor roles, the role of the ruling class, also the role of the middle forces in society. And then I had a funny time where at the end of that play, everyone's supposed to die for the country. I was a teacher, colonial-minded teacher, and then at the end of the scene, they were looking for me. I was also lying dead. And they said, why did you die? Yes, of course, because I'm a teacher, I became enlightened. And I went to fight with the masses, and so I died. Isn't that possible? I left college without my father knowing. It was in 1971 when the writ of habeas corpus was suspended because it was already a dry run for martial law. And so there was already a call for people to go underground and be deployed in different areas and communities. It's the movement. Kamanyang is part of the National Democratic Movement.
Okay, hey, it's me. I just want to chime in here because Myrla says some things that I think need a little bit more context before we keep going. On August 21, 1971, following a series of protests, violent clashes between protesters and police, and the bombing of the Liberal Party at Plaza Miranda, Ferdinand Marcos suspends the writ of habeas corpus, which means anyone can be arrested and put in prison without being brought to court. But protests, resistance, violence around the country continue. On the evening of September 23, 1972, Marcos announces the Philippines is under martial law.
The proclamation of martial law is not a military takeover. I, as your duly elected President of the Republic, use this power which may be implemented by the military authorities, but still is a power embodied in the Constitution to protect the Republic of the Philippines and our democracy.
Thousands of people who oppose the Marcos regime, like students, activists, journalists, and politicians, are arrested, including perhaps most famously Senator Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr. By this time, Myrla and many activists are already underground.
Can you just tell me, do you remember the day when martial law was, enacted, when Marcos went on TV to announce martial law? Do you remember where you were, or did you watch it live?
No. That morning, we woke up to the news that martial law has been declared. We had no idea what's going to happen. I felt personally scared what's going to happen. Are we going to be arrested now? I wasn't anymore working as Kamanyang. I was already integrated into a district cultural bureau for activists who were stationed at Araneta University. There was a headquarters of nationalist groups there. And so we were already full-timers. The consensus of the group was to disband, go home, get our stuff, and regroup. When I went home, my father was freaking out and he didn't want me to go out of the house, so I couldn't go to where we were supposed to regroup. He was freaking out for my safety and the safety of the family because he works for the government. My mother also works for the government, so they might lose their jobs, and I'm working as an activist and I would put into danger the whole family. But I still wanted to go out. There would be no change in society if nobody would go out and continue this fight, especially that, martial law has been declared. So who would stay fighting now if we don't go out? So what I did was plead my father to let me go, but he didn't want to. What he did was to have my cousins play chess in front of our door so that I wouldn't be able to go out. So I wasn't able to. But until I asked my cousins if I could buy something from the store. And that's when I was able to go out and join the nationalist forces again. I didn't go back home.
Hey, me again. Before I move on, I'd like to switch gears and recommend a podcast I think you might like. First, let me ask you something. What do you remember about the Philippines from your history class? Exactly. WhatsApp is a podcast that tells the stories beyond the dates and explores how history shapes the present and affects the future, making sure to cast Filipinos as active agents in history rather than passive subjects of colonialism. WhatsApp is a fun, informative history podcast brought to you by the folks at Puma Podcast, a podcast network from the Philippines. I highly recommend the episode about the assassination of Ninoy Aquino. It was the first one I listened to, and I really learned a lot. I'm going to play a clip of it so you can hear a little bit from show hosts, reporter Siege Stantenko and historian Sab Schnabel.
What's the first thing you remember when you think of Ninoy Aquino? Pustahan tayo. It's the bottle glasses and the hand on his chin. Or his assassination and the people power revolution that followed it. Maybe you even imagine that image of him in a cream-colored safari suit on the tarmac just moments after he was shot.
There's no shortage of tributes and articles remembering his life, death, and legacy. But this is History Rebooted, so we'll be doing something different. We'll talk about Ninoy's decision to come home in the first place and how his support system worked to make it happen.
Open tayo sa Act 1, the decision to return. Ninoy had been languishing in exile in Boston since his heart surgery in 1980. While he had already been a vocal critic of the Marcos dictatorship when he was in the Philippines, he made a promise to Imelda that he would no longer badmouth the regime. It was the condition on which they allowed him to leave.
But now that he was no longer imprisoned and in desperate need of health care, Ninoy insisted that a pact with the devil is no pact at all.
Laglaga na!
Dun dun dun!
His exile only further made him into the face of the opposition to Marcos. He would go to different colleges to speak about the situation in the Philippines, giving lectures opposing the regime and its rampant human rights violations. But Ninoy was desperate to go back.
People tried to dissuade him. His family tried to convince him to stay in the States. According to Kashiwahara, the more people tried to dissuade him, the more he was convinced that if there was any time to strike, it was now.
That was WhatsApp. You can listen to it on Puma Podcast. That network name is sort of like a Tagalog twist on the verb to podcast, like Puma Podcast, not a nod to the animal or sports brand, I think. Anyway, it's available wherever you listen to podcasts and other things. Now, back to Myrla.
Well, before I became a full-timer, I already ran into thinking of that tough decision of that I wouldn't be able to graduate, wouldn't be able to have a career or have a comfortable life. The kind that I dreamed that I would be a lawyer, I would have my own car, my own house. And so when martial law was declared, I think I was partially ready. We never knew how it would look like, but it meant that we have to give up many things, including our ties to the family, because that would be like they would be tracers. It was a hard decision. So it was martial law period, and so we work underground, meaning that we organize underground. We change our names. We don't use our real names for most of the time. We don't live in just one place. My type of work is I would transfer from one house to the other to be able to organize. And I've done that, most of it in Central Luzon, until I was deployed in the area of the military bases, which was Subic Naval Base. It was one of the largest military facilities of the US outside of the continental United States. It's mostly a docking place that would allow them to deploy forces for different wars: Vietnam War, Iraq War. I was transferred in 1981 in the area of the military base, so I would be part of an organizing committee to organize students, workers in the base, and urban poor dwellers, most of them scavengers, squatters, living around the areas of the Subic Naval Base. We would go out and talk to people, organize groups, organize rallies. I think it was effective at that time, but it was hard. You could get arrested. We had to march for many days with the threat of other political groups attacking us. Yeah, it was difficult because you also run into some sort of sexual harassment from some of the people that you try to organize. Nothing really happened to me, safety-wise, but I was in difficult situations when I had to assert myself so I wouldn't get into something. And then the funding is very low, so you have to produce your own support. Oftentimes, we're being fed by families or people who support the movement. We slept in the homes of the people whom we were organizing. So that would mean that we were sleeping in the squatter areas, hardly in a bed.
Were there ever times that you just wanted to give up?
I was more like excited at that time. I don't think before martial law, there was hardly a time that I wanted to give up. It was more like when it was already martial law. When I was already in the underground, I was missing my family. There were so many raids. You think of your safety, you think of the loneliness of probably dying away from your family. It makes you think, where am I going? Where is this going? The rates were like,
Where would you be?
I would be in a village and then the Philippine Constabulary would come in and encircle the barrio.
Me again. Just want to clarify some terms here. The Philippine Constabulary was a militarized national police force.
And try to find people who are not from that barrio who are staying there or possibly with the NPA.
NPA, National People's Army, the armed wing of the Communist Party of the Philippines.
Or probably with a local organizing work that's happening there. I wasn't with the NPA, but I was there for the organizing. I was there for coordinating with different units and lines of work. And then one day, we just woke up. The military was there and they encircled the whole barrio. And I know that I will be arrested. The military were using the butts of their Armalites to have everyone out of the house. And I managed to dress up like as if I'm from there. And then when I went out, I acted like I was the daughter of the owner of the house. I don't really speak the dialect very well, so I acted like I had a toothache. And then they were all watching me. They were training their guns. And then somebody from the neighbors said, "How long have you been here?" And I said, "Since yesterday." And I said, "My tooth is aching." And then they said, okay, go there." So I passed that one. I did use my theater skill to get out of that situation. But everyone, including the ones who hid under the house, they were all arrested. They were tortured. There were so many other times when I was close to being arrested. And there was a time when we had to retreat from one barrio that I have to join the others, and we went to the sugarcane fields and we learned that the others were killed. So it was getting really very scary. Those were the times when I would really think of my future, think of my family, that I'm missing them, the comfort of home. But at that time, it was like we have to defend ourselves and we have to get rid of this dictatorship. So I still carried on until 1983 when I was arrested.
The arrest and what happened after, next time on Long Distance. This episode was written, edited, mixed, and hosted by me, Paola Mardo. Long Distance is produced by Patrick Epino and me. You can learn more about this story in the show notes on our website, longdistanceradio.com. This season of Long Distance is produced with support from PRX and the Google Podcast Creator Program, as well as our donors on PayPal and our Patreon members, supporters, and ambassadors. To learn more about supporting the show, head to longdistanceradio.com/support. Music in this episode is by Blue Dot Sessions. Theme song is by Sea Light and the Prisms. That's it for now. Thanks for listening.